You ever look at the news, see all these reports about a strong economy, and just think to yourself, this doesn't feel right. It just doesn't match what you're seeing and feeling every day? Well, if that's you, you are definitely not alone. There is this widespread feeling of economic anxiety that's just bubbling right under the surface of all those positive headlines. And today, we're going to unpack a theory that might just explain why that is. I mean, this is the big question, isn't it? On paper, everything looks great. The numbers are up. But for so many people, there's this constant nagging feeling of precarity, like the floor could just drop out from under you at any second. So, what is really going on? All right, to figure this out, the first thing we have to do is explore this huge gap that's opened up between the official economic data and, the actual experience of living life for so many people. And here it is, laid out plain as day. The data says one thing, but what people feel is something totally different. We're told unemployment is low, but layoff fears are everywhere. We hear about positive wage growth, but it feels like every extra dollar is just getting eaten up by rising costs. This isn't just a vibe. It's a fundamental disconnect between the spreadsheet and the street. This quote really gets to the heart of the problem. The official stats we see, like from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they're kind of blunt instruments. They're designed to answer a very simple question. How many people are working? They can tell you if someone worked just 1 hour for pay in a week, but what they can't tell you is if that person just lost a stable, high-paying career and is now just stringing together a bunch of part-time gigs to survive. They measure the quantity of jobs, not the quality. So, what's really driving this deep sense of anxiety? Well, let's start digging for clues. And the first major one is the unique and, frankly, powerful economic shock of artificial intelligence. Now, this is absolutely crucial. For decades, when we talked about automation, we were usually talking about blue-collar factory jobs. But this time is different. AI is coming for knowledge workers, the writers, the analysts, the paralegals, even software developers. And why does that matter so much? Because this group is the engine of discretionary spending. They're the ones going out to dinner, booking trips, and buying services. So when they start feeling insecure, they pull back, and the whole economy feels that ripple effect. And what you get is this powerful, two-sided shockwave. On the one hand, you've got consumers. They're worried about their jobs, so they slam the brakes on spending. But at the exact same time, you've got businesses. Things are changing so fast with AI that trying to make a 5-year plan seems completely pointless. That uncertainty makes them freeze hiring and put off big investments. So, boom, you get a simultaneous hit to both consumer demand and business confidence. It's a really nasty combination. All right, on to our second clue. This is a pressure point that millions of us feel every single month. The inflexible, just totally unforgiving housing market. Think about it this way. The price of a TV can go down. Gas prices can fall, but housing costs are incredibly sticky. They really, really resist going down. And that traps households between a rock and a hard place. Your income might be shaky or even shrinking, but you're stuck with this massive, non-negotiable payment every month. The pressure is just immense. The result is a housing market that's basically frozen solid. On one side, you have potential buyers looking at 7% mortgage rates and saying, no way, especially when they remember seeing 3% rates just a little while ago. But on the other side, you have homeowners who are locked in by what some people call golden handcuffs, these amazing sub 4% mortgage rates. They are not going to sell unless they are absolutely forced to. So you get this standoff where nobody wants to move, and the number of homes actually for sale just plummets. Okay, you might be thinking, but what about rent? If apartments are empty, why don't big landlords just lower the prices? Well, here's the thing. Their incentives are completely different from your typical small landlord. A huge institutional owner would rather keep a unit empty than cut the rent. Why? Because lowering the official rent on one unit would, on paper, devalue their entire building, maybe their entire portfolio. They're not playing for monthly cash flow, they're playing for the final sale price years down the road. It's a kind of perverse logic that keeps rents stubbornly high, even when people can't afford them. So we have the AI shock hitting people's incomes, and we have the housing trap squeezing whatever money is left. Now let's look at how these two clues connect and create a really dangerous economic feedback loop.
The mechanism here is something economists call a deflationary spiral, and it is a nasty, nasty phenomenon. It's basically a self-reinforcing cycle where falling demand and falling prices get locked together, feeding on each other, and making it incredibly difficult for the economy to recover.
Okay, let's walk through it. It starts when people get nervous and pulled back on spending. That drop in demand means businesses see their revenues fall, so they're forced to cut costs. And what does that mean? Layoffs and wage cuts. Of course, that shrinks people's incomes, which causes demand to collapse even further. And here's the real kicker. All your existing debt, your mortgage, your car loan, it actually becomes a heavier burden in real terms. And then the whole loop just repeats itself, getting worse with each cycle, dragging the economy down. But here's what makes this whole situation so insidious, so hard to put your finger on. It doesn't look like one of those dramatic, sudden crashes we see in the movies. It feels more like a slow, quiet, relentless grind. Think about the difference. A fast crash is brutal, no question, but it's obvious. Everyone sees it happen and it triggers a clear, immediate policy response. A slow grind, on the other hand, is quiet. It's insidious. Every bad signal, a small dip in spending here, a tiny rise in loan defaults there, it can be explained away as a fluke. So policy gets paralyzed because there's no single oh my god moment. And instead of sharp, concentrated pain, what you get is this chronic, slow-motion erosion of wealth and security over years. And what's just so cruel about a slow grind is how it feels to the individual. It doesn't feel like a big systemic crisis where you can point your finger and say, it's the economy. It feels like a personal failure. Your savings are just slowly draining away. Finding a new job takes a couple more months than you thought it would. Each little setback feels like it's your fault, making you blame yourself instead of the much larger forces at play. So, if this slow grind just keeps on going, where does it lead? Well, the source material we're looking at here suggests a pretty provocative and frankly unsettling endgame. The term they use for it is New-Feudalism, and what that describes is an economy where wealth and power don't really come from creating value, from building things or offering new services. Instead, it comes from just owning essential assets, like housing. You end up with a small ownership class that extracts rent and wealth from a much larger class of people who have very little chance of ever moving up. And this happens through something called a ratchet effect. It works like this. Every time there's economic stress, some regular homeowners are forced to sell, often at a discount. And who's waiting there with cash? Big institutional capital. They swoop in and buy up these assets. Every time this happens, a little more of the housing supply is permanently taken off the market for individual buyers. The ownership class shrinks, the renter class grows, and wealth is structurally transferred from households to institutions. It's a ratchet. It only turns in one direction. And that brings us to this final, really haunting thought from the source material. In this new kind of system, power becomes abstract. It's hidden behind layers of corporations and complex financial products. You know, the medieval peasant at least knew who his lord was. Today, it's a system of extraction, where the strings are pulled by invisible forces, leaving so many of us with that exact sense of unease we talked about at the beginning. You can't quite place it, but you feel it every single day.